Shabbat Shalom. Today we have read from the first reading of the book of Sefer Shemot. This is Shabbat Shemot. This is the first parashah, of course, from Shemot. Shemot means names. And here we have presented to us a series of questions. Think about these things, and perhaps they're questions that you yourself have asked at various times. Why did it take God more than 400 years to respond to the pain of the enslaved people of Israel? We know that they were in Egypt that long, and for a good part of that, they were enslaved to one degree or another to the people of Egypt, specifically to the Pharaoh of Egypt. Why didn't God simply use his power in Egypt and rescue us without calling or using Moshe? Why did God harden Pharaoh's heart, or at least allow the hardening of his heart, rather than encouraging him to do the right thing and release our people? And of course, the first question that comes to mind is, who is this who spoke to Moshe from a burning bush? Why, when asked to identify himself, did he say, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, meaning, I am who I am? If you asked me who I was and I told you that, would you feel any further forward? It sounds rather cryptic, doesn't it? Confusing? Maybe esoteric? Wasn't God being purposely mysterious? Or should we be looking for a deeper meaning to his reply? Well, we're going to address these questions as we get into this reading. Parashah Shemot is the narrative of our first galut, our first exile from the land that God had already given to our fathers and to us. The sojourn of Yisrael in Egypt has become the story of our exile and enslavement, a prototype of all our subsequent exiles and persecutions. But it is also the narrative of the making of our greatest leader, Moshe, and the creation of the nation of Israel. Everything that Torah tells us about Moshe is a lesson in Jewish leadership, and Yocheved is the remarkable woman in whose womb would be formed and under whose wisdom would develop the one whom God had already chosen to redeem Israel from that first exile. We know that when Moshe was born, he was concealed for a time because parents of all the Hebrew newborn males lived in perpetual terror of discovery by Pharaoh's baby killers. In a remarkable act of faith, Moshe's mother, Yocheved, placed him in a reed basket, a tiny ark on the Nile, trusting him to God. Moshe's placement in the Nile was not only a demonstration of his mother's faith, it was also the first stage of our people's liberation. And thanks to yet another female, his sister Miriam, and her careful watching and ingenious ploy, Moshe was nursed and taught through early childhood by his own mother. He was then brought to Pharaoh's palace to be raised as a member of the royal family. Thus, he was both a Hebrew slave and an Egyptian prince, gaining intimate knowledge of the essence of Pharaoh's power and of Egyptian culture. The first action taken by Moshe, explicitly recounted in Torah, was a demonstration of a kind of leadership, the wrong kind. When Moshe went out to his brothers and saw their affliction, he was already 40 years old. But his years in Pharaoh's palace had not kept him from an affinity with his own people, and he empathized with their plight. He saw an Egyptian slave master beating an Israelite to death, and he felt compelled to act as most of us would, binding his fate to that of his people. The next day, he acted again, intervening in a quarrel between two Bnei Yisrael, a sign to him of internal disunity. We have to stand together. His leadership and authority were rejected by his brother Israelites, and he found himself unable to defend, redeem, or guide his people. His only choices were to leave Egypt or to die at the hands of Pharaoh. We could call Moshe's years in the Midbar, the desert, years of leadership in the making. We could call it that, although Moshe himself had no idea that he was being prepared for such an awesome task, or in fact for anything at all. Still, the stage was being set by God, as with Joseph's years in prison. Moshe went from that baby cast into the Nile to a young Egyptian prince, to a fearless but rash and reckless defender of his people, and an equally fearless campaigner for Jewish unity. And finally, he became a shepherd in the wilderness. It was there, after yet another 40 years, that God revealed himself to Moshe in the burning bush. You know, so often people at an early age are anxious to get out there and do something. They don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it, but they want to do it. God prepared Moshe for a period of 80 years before he was ready for the job that God had for him. Consider that. And also the fact that age is insignificant to God in terms of what he wants you to do. Joseph also was older when he became a real leader. Hashem offered Moshe this challenge. I have seen the affliction of my people. I have heard their cries. I know their sorrows. Now the challenge. I am sending you to redeem them. Go, take them out of Egypt and bring them to Mount Sinai, the place where he saw the burning bush, for their election as my chosen people. Wow. And Moshe's response? He refused. No, he didn't just refuse. He argued with God, presenting every conceivable justification to decline this commission, until we're told God's anger burned against Moshe. 5 times Moshe refused, and each time he presented a different excuse. Who am I to go to Pharaoh and take the Bnei Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? When I actually come to Bnei Israel, they'll say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? They will never believe me or listen to me, for they will say, the Lord has not appeared to you. And finally, I have never been a man of words, neither yesterday, nor even the day before, nor even since you spoke to your servant, for I am slow of speech and tongue. Interesting, because really, we don't see any evidence of that in his future actions. Well, finally he said, send, I ask you, by the hand of whomever you will send. Was this a negative capitulation? Or another way of saying, send anybody else, but don't send me? Note that Moshe changed his justification with each answer, sheltering each time behind yet another rationalization. We're all good at those. And he was too. But God didn't accept them. His first 2 replies are based on personal inadequacy. This line is particularly evident in his second reply. What shall I say to them? The 3rd time, he hid behind his people. They won't believe me. After this argument was overruled by God, Moshe reverted to a plea of specific inadequacy. And the wording of this plea, with its multiple alsos, gam in Hebrew, suggests the full force of Moshe's hesitation and the intensity of his misgivings. Moshe addressed the Holy One, you are the Lord of the world. Do you want me to be an emissary? I've never been a man of words. Yes, action man. The one who killed the Egyptian. When God overruled even this argument, Moshe's 5th plea is different. He says, send, I ask you, by the hand of whomever you will send. In these words, we find an exhausted, desperate, blank refusal, as if all his arguments have been silenced and he is left barren and bewildered, but still holding on to his determination not to go. However, the message he received was, come, and I will send you to Pharaoh and bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. An absolute statement. Now, actually, 2 distinct statements are involved in that. It is not, come, I will send you to bring lahozi, forth my people, but come, I will send you and bring forth vehotzi. We should understand the words in this way. Come now, let me send you to Pharaoh. And if you ask what good it will do, bring my people out of Egypt. your words will have the effect of actually getting them out. The first half unfolds the command to undertake the mission and no more. Go to Pharaoh. Second half contains both the purpose of the mission and a promise of success. So Moshe's first refusal was similarly composed of two parts. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? Am I of sufficient status, a mere stranger, to enter the court of the greatest king on earth, the king of Egypt, and take the children of Israel out of Egypt? Even if I were to obtain the privilege of a royal audience, most unlikely, and succeed, after all, he's a shepherd, and succeed in speaking to him, what could I say that would have the slightest chance of appealing to Pharaoh? Is he such a fool as to listen to me and set his slaves free? For a moment, stand with Moshe on that holy ground. And God called to him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. And he said, Hineni, here am I. And he said, come no nearer. Take your shoes from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. Standing in sacred space, he hid his face, afraid to view the Holy One. Yes, he knew he was standing in the presence of the Eternal One. Against such a background, does he ply God with political answers, asking if Pharaoh would be a fool to listen to him and send his slaves out of the country? Consider the atmosphere, the divine presence, as Moshe senses the nothingness of man, acutely aware of his own human weaknesses and frailty. What are we? What is our life? What is our righteousness that God should bestow on us his kindness? God declared, I will send you to Pharaoh and take my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Moshe's reply could encapsulate these thoughts. Who am I? Of what importance am I that I should speak with kings, and that I should take the children of Israel out? And even if I'm of importance, what merit do the Bnei Israel have that a miracle should be created for them and I should take them out of Egypt? This understanding of Moshe's words suits God's reply, as he does not deny the unworthiness or insignificance of the receiver of his message, but he counters with a single assurance, certainly I will be with you. Moshe replies, but I don't know your essence. How can I present myself as your messenger when I can't explain the nature of the one who sent me? And God tells him who he is, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, assuring him that he will be believed and offering a few signs as support, perhaps more for Moshe's benefit than anyone's. And then responding to Moshe's second thought, that Israel doesn't deserve God's chesed or rachamim. God declares, when you have brought the children of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mount. In other words, Israel's deliverance is a foregone conclusion. It's going to happen. And who is Moshe to decide whether Israel is worthy or not? Listen to what God is saying to Moshe. He's saying it to us as well. I have an ultimate purpose. My people are destined to receive the Torah on this mountain 3 months after they leave Egypt. Not a privilege, but a responsibility awaits them. Leaving Egypt is not a reward for good behavior, but the prelude to a destiny that God has ordained. Release from slavery has a purpose far beyond its immediate end. Here is a profound message. The exodus from Egypt, the liberation from a pagan yoke, independence and freedom are not ends in themselves. The return to our homeland, the transformation from dependence to sovereignty, slavery to freedom, these are instruments, the means for achieving the ultimate goal of service to God, which is why God created our nation, the nation of Israel. We were not released from persecution in order to be set free from responsibility, but so that we can receive the responsibility to be the bearers of Torah, a light to the nations of the world. This thought is repeated. I will be your God and you will be my people. I am the Lord your God who brought you forth from the land of Egypt. I shall break the bonds of your yoke and lead you to understanding. Vayikra 28. And Moshe was afraid. We see in Moshe's further responses to God that he's not merely disinclined to take up this mission. He's genuinely frightened. But then fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. God told Moshe that he will deliver the Bnei Israel by sending Moshe. He will deliver them not only from the Egyptians, but from Egypt. Moshe is fearful on both counts because he views himself as a man of no account, a shepherd, whom Pharaoh will kill to have out of his way. Who is he that he should bring Israel to the land of promise? Surely the people will reject Moshe's pronouncements and repudiate the idea of following him anywhere, as the two Israelites rejected his attempted intervention in their argument. If for some reason they're willing to escape slavery, well, yes, and they accept his leadership and leave Egypt, why should they follow him anywhere? Moshe had every reason to be as afraid of the Canaanites as he was of the Egyptians. So why should they follow him to Canaan? But God said, do not be afraid of Pharaoh, for I shall certainly be with you to deliver you. And this shall be the sign to you, to the people, that I have sent you to them. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mount. God clarifies that the Bnei Israel will serve him and follow his commandments, and that they will also believe Moshe and follow him wherever he directs them, because they will see that God is with him. In order for God to bring Israel out of Egypt and to the land of promise, two categories of divine intervention are required. First, Moshe is assured that he will not be killed and that ultimately Egypt will bow to God's command. That's pretty awesome in itself. And secondly, that our people, who are not necessarily known as great followers, will accept Moshe's leadership. Moshe expresses his fears as he continues to find personal excuses. He tells God he's not a man of words. It seems likely from what he says that he may have stammered or had some speech impediment, but we may add that he was no longer fluent in Egyptian because he'd run away from that country 40 years earlier, and he was now 80 years old. Perhaps he didn't stammer, but certain sounds were difficult for him to pronounce. God's answer? Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes a man dumb? I shall be with your mouth and teach you. More likely, Moshe was not an eloquent and glib speaker with what we call the gift of the gab. He wasn't able to impress others with his elocution, which fits the description. Moshe was a very meek, more than all the men upon the earth. Yirmiyahu makes a similar profession when he says, "Behold, I cannot speak, for I'm like a child." And finally, why should Moshe give up the peace and quiet, pardon me, of the shepherding life to go back to Egypt and attempt to convince Pharaoh? Why should he do that? Moshe's excuses were by this time running out, and he cries, "Oh, please, my God, don't send me. Send by the hand of whom you shall send." Is this something of a contradiction? Moshe's people are suffering under the taskmaster's whip while Pharaoh continues to bathe in the blood of Israel's sons. The moment for which they have hoped and prayed for generations has finally come as God prepares to send Moshe to redeem his people. Why does Moshe continue to refuse? Is this humility? He's not a good speaker? Interestingly, our sages interpret the words, "send by the hand of whom you shall send," to mean something more profound and prophetic. This is very interesting. Send by the hand of whom you shall send in the end of days. Mashiach, the ultimate redeemer of Israel. Hasidic sages explain that Moshe knew he did not merit the right to bring Israel to the Holy Land and achieve the redemption of his people. They say he knew that Israel would again be exiled, would again suffer the physical and spiritual afflictions of Galut. So Moshe refused. If the time for Israel's redemption had come, he pleads with God, "Send Mashiach, the one through whom you will effect our complete and eternal redemption." It is said that for 7 days and nights, Moshe contested God's script for history and was prepared to incur God's wrath for the sake of Israel. According to them, after assuming the mission to take us out of Egypt, he embarked on a lifelong struggle to make this our final redemption. We hear in these Hasidic teachings the hope, the heartfelt cry of our people throughout history for Mashiach's redemption. Not the redemption that Moshe could bring, but the one which only Mashiach could bring. And may he return soon. Mashiach. We want him now. Hashem has called. Yes, he called Moshe, but he has also called us. As we have stood with Moshe, now consider where you are standing at this moment. Not physically here in the UK or wherever you are, but where and how you are living your life. God spoke to Moshe in the wilderness, a wilderness which had become Moshe's life, where he probably thought his life would end. It was arid. I can tell you how arid from my visits to Israel. It was also quiet and peaceful, although possibly empty of real challenges and without goals of any substance. Perhaps your life is that sort of wilderness, a wilderness in which you've become satisfied and content, despite the lack of any real purpose. Is it barren and fruitless because your fellowship with God is non-existent, or you have allowed other activities and the evil inclination to control your life? Are you reluctant to enter fully into a relationship with God because of what it might cost you, or because it takes too much effort, and you, like Moshe, want a peaceful, quiet life? Self-righteousness, as well as self-deprecation, can hold God at arm's length. Moshe was called to a humbling mission among our people, chosen to tackle a huge challenge which he did not want to face. No matter how many excuses he found, however, God came back with an answer that stopped him in his tracks. The ultimate purpose for Moshe's calling was not only to challenge our people according to God's plan, but also to change Moshe's life from shepherding sheep to leading our people in worship and service to him. As God chose Moshe and our people, God has chosen you. What are your excuses? He has a purpose for choosing you for his service. It doesn't end with coming into a relationship with him through the atonement of Mashiach Yeshua. That's the beginning. His purpose for your life is the reason he has chosen us as a people, that you might show forth his glory and bring honor to him and become a light to all those around you. We read these words in this regard before Mashiach Yeshua left his Talmudim in Yochanan 20. The Talmudim rejoiced when they saw him, and Yeshua said to them, "Shalom, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so also I am sending you." Think about that and apply it to your life. I hope you have a good week, a good Shabbat, and I look forward to seeing you next Shabbat. God bless you.